Aloha, Dan Gavir with Werner Paddles. I am the Southwest sales rep for all the paddles in our whole line. We do a complete line of kayak paddles, and I'm also the head of sales and design for the stand-up and outrigger paddles. Right here I'm holding our stand-up paddle. This is called the Spanker. What you find here is a 100% carbon fiber composite paddle. This is built with a pre-preg material. Pre-preg means that the carbon is pre-impregnated with the epoxy resin, so you only use the most minimal amount of epoxy resin to just simply wet the fibers. All of these sheets of material are kept in climate controlled areas at our factory at exactly 38 degrees. What makes this material kick or go off or become hard, as they say, is adding heat. What we do is we put these in an autoclave mold. These are stainless steel molds. We assemble all the parts dry, and then we cook it at a certain temperature for a certain amount of time, and that makes the epoxy within that pre-impregnated carbon fiber kick. And that's how we get such a nice, hand-built, beautiful product here. Everything is built in our factory in Sultan, Washington. Our backbone has been the kayak industry and whitewater. We've been building paddles for over 20 years, and we build the Spanker on the exact same premise. As you can see, it's got some beautiful angles. This is all hand-built in the United States. A very strong product. I can really lay into this product, this paddle, and feel confident that it's going to get me on and off the waves, in and out of trouble, or if I'm doing a 10 or 15 mile downwinder, it's not going to leave me stranded a mile offshore. Okay? We're using a blow molded nylon handle. Reason for this is that carbon fiber and stuff like that is more brittle, doesn't take big hits as well. And a classic scenario I see all the time is a guy gets out with his new paddle, he very gingerly sets it up against the car, and then he goes and starts messing with his board, and his paddle falls on the concrete. And what's going to happen? Well, the handle's going to hit the ground first, and if it's a composite material, it's probably going to crack or break. That's why we use a blow molded nylon material in the handle. This is a wide, what we call a T-grip. Gives you a lot of blade control. Okay, it's wide. It gives you leverage over the blade. So while I'm paddling, I have ultimate blade control while the paddle is in the water, but I also have ultimate blade control when the paddle comes out of the water. So if I'm working against the wind, I can very easily feather that paddle into the wind and have the least amount of resistance while paddling into the wind. Some of the other features you'll find in the Spanker is a closed cell foam core blade. What that's going to give you is more buoyancy in the blade, so that when you put the paddle in the water, the buoyancy in the blade actually supports the weight of the paddle. This paddle is 18 to 19 ounces depending on the length, but when you put the paddle in the water, it becomes neutrally buoyant because that foam blade completely supports the weight of the whole paddle. So even though it's only 18 or 19 ounces, when you're paddling with it in the water, it feels like it's 0 ounces because the actual buoyancy in there supports the whole weight of the paddle. Another nice thing about this closed foam core is if you do happen to puncture it on the reef, get a little hole in it for whatever reason, it's not going to suck water. And when it sucks water, you get the classic problems of delamination from the water condensating within the paddle, and then if there's any heat changes, the temperature goes up, that water can't do anything except for expand, and that blows your paddle up from the inside out. So that closed cell foam has been developed and tested in the whitewater industry now for about 15 years, and we find that it works really well as well in this paddle. Another thing that the foam really helps with in the buoyancy is it allows the paddle to release out of the water. So when you take a stroke, that paddle wants to naturally pop out of the water from the buoyancy. And what that does for you is it allows you to have a much faster cadence or a higher stroke rate. And where a higher stroke rate may be an advantage is when you're catching a wave, catching a little piece of wind swell, things where you may have to increase your stroke rate or your stroke cadence to stay on that wave or stay on that piece of wind chop, or simply get away from a closeout zone or out of the impact zone. That extra buoyancy in the blade is going to give you a higher stroke rate. Another thing you see here is a very pronounced rib right here. A lot of people don't know what this is or what it does. It's called a dihedral. And what this dihedral does is it sheds the water off both directions of the blade to reduce the high and low pressure frequencies that build up on a paddle surface. If you have a flat paddle with a powerful blade, what it's going to want to do is the water isn't going to know what to do, so it oscillates from one side to the other on what we call the lobes on either side of the center line. And what that does is causes the paddle to flutter through the water. Just like a leaf, when it falls off a tree, it flutters down to the ground. This is going to pull nice and straight and allow you to maintain a looser grip. Because what happens when a paddle flutters, you want to grab the paddle really tight with your lower hand. Can you imagine doing that for 10, 15 miles downwind, talking 5,000 or 6,000 strokes? You're going to get what's called forearm pump. It's not great technique. So this dihedral lessens the fluttering and allows you to paddle with a very loose, open grip. It's got a really positive grip on the water. It pulls a lot of water and it's instant power. So that's another reason why this dihedral is very pronounced in the Spanker. This paddle also has a small piece of nylon edging that runs around the edge of the paddle here. What this does is it keeps the paddle from wearing out. So if you're grinding it on rocks or on the bottom, this edge here is not going to delaminate, and it's going to last a long, long time. Another thing we developed in the whitewater industry, where you're constantly grinding the paddle on rocks in the bottom of the river. So a lot of these aspects that we've learned through developing kayak paddles, we've integrated into our stand-up paddle. First and foremost is being performance. We want a nice light paddle, okay? Lighter is going to mean that you're lifting less weight over the course of the day. If I had a paddle with 10 more ounces on it, after 1,000 strokes, that's 10,000 more ounces. That happens to be about 1,200 pounds for every 1,000 strokes you take. So that in and of itself is a lot less effort, makes it more efficient. It's going to give you more energy to have more fun at the end of the day. Okay? Another thing we base the premise of our paddles on is durability. We don't want to leave you out there stranded in the impact zone, stranded offshore doing a long downwinder. So that's a very strong material. We build all this stuff in-house in the United States. That's another key thing, is we want to keep our business here and we want to fuel the local economy. And Werner is a business based on servicing specialty retailers, specialty kayak shops. No different than the specialty board shops you're going to be buying your stand-up paddling equipment from. So that's something we pride ourselves on. You're never going to get an answering machine when you call for customer service. Okay, you have real people answering the phone, and we all paddle. We all know all the components of paddling, and we can talk about paddling. If you want to call me, go ahead. 425-387-7258. You're not going to find a more stoked dude to talk to you on the phone about stand-up paddling. And that's my spiel.